So my TPM chip has died on my machine.
Right.
And I don't know how a chip can die and not the whole system board, which is really odd. But this machine seems to fail at one chip at a time or one slot at a time. And I'm grateful for that.
And
Yeah,
it came with that chip in it already.
yeah. The TPM was in there, believe it or not. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And even what's even more unbelievable is that Microsoft was kind enough to say, "Oh yes, you may upgrade to Windows 11." I was like, "Oh, I should be grateful. Thank you, 1,000. Thank you so much, Microsoft." Hello and welcome. My name is Richard Simon. I am Cloud Therapist. This is the March episode of Cloud State of Play 2025. I'm saying 2025 because I can't believe that the first quarter of 2025 is already gone. So yeah, interesting that I feel that just this year is going really, really fast, and there's so much stuff happening. There's so much articles. We've been discussing that on email and WhatsApp and so on, and we're kind of just trying to really make our way through some of the interesting stuff that seems to be coming out. So hopefully, this month's topics will be of interest to you as well. As always, I have the dazzling Paul Bevan with me. Paul is the Director of Infrastructure Research at Bloor Research. Paul, welcome to this month's episode.
Well, hello everybody, and I hope to dazzle well today. So we shall see.
Yes.
I think, Richard, you need to go through the alphabet.
I do. I don't know.
You've used so many different terms. I've lost track of whether you've repeated yourself.
Yeah. Well, I've asked ChatGPT not to repeat the adjectives, so hopefully we'll. Like I said, I think I keep saying, and we've said before, I don't think we're ever going to run out of them.
No.
So yeah. Anyway, so yeah, how are you doing? Everything okay with you?
Yeah, as you say, there's so much going on,
So much going
whether it's
on.
IT related or non-IT related at the moment. But I think my brain hurts is probably the best way of describing it.
Yeah, so it's only the first quarter, exactly. And I have to say, I haven't done anything yet this year. I've attended some conferences. I think we've done some live streams. So guys, check out some of the live streams we've done. I attended the the State of Open UK, so the SUCON conference back in Feb. So check out the live stream for that. I attended recently the Gen AI Summit. We didn't do a live stream for that, but that was interesting. I think some of the sort of the outcome of that, I think I've covered in a live stream video. So that's either out already or not, depending on when you're watching this. So check that out on the channel as well. And obviously, more recently, KubeCon London, which was a record-breaking attendance for KubeCon, and we did live streams for that. There's lots of offline interviews that we've done as well, so all that will be on the channel. Again, depending on who you're watching this, see that out already or will be out shortly. There'll be previews, there'll be reviews, and various other things as well. But yeah, it's all flown by so quickly. Even kind of meetups and things like that seem to kind of come and go very quickly.
You've forgotten one of the biggest. You've forgotten sort of the Tech Show London.
Oh yes, and obviously yes, the Tech Show London. Actually, I think I did make a note of it. I was going to mention it later, but yeah, certainly the Tech Show London or Cloud Expo Europe or Cloud and AI Infrastructure Conference or show. I'm still confused with the naming there. So because they combine all of those together, right? So that's the thing. Anyway, okay. So we have some really cracking topics for you this month. Can't wait to reveal them and kind of go through them with Paul as well. Let's do that right now. Actually, okay. So the first one is a report, I guess, a kind of a summary report from Gartner. It's called "How to Succeed in Digital Transformation for 2025." So quite recent and relatively relevant, I guess, for what we're talking about. How to succeed in digital transformation, or DX. The second one is a massive report by Google, and I mean massive as in the size of the file was really big. It was so big I couldn't actually even share it on email, on Gmail with Paul. So that's a bit ironic, in that Google produced a report that you could not share on, not attached to Gmail. So I had to put it on G Drive and share it with Paul. Yeah, so it's a Google report. It's called the AI Business Trends Report 2025. And again, I think I was alerted by that by Google recently. So that came on, I think it came on an email or something. And the last one is an article on the news stack called "What is Edge Computing?" or something like that. It seems to kind of talk a little bit more about edge computing and discuss the kind of the contents of that and what is edge computing. Kind of provide various information in regards to that. Or actually, sorry. So the actual article name is called "Are Your Apps Truly Nomadic?" But we're kind of picking on the edge computing aspect of that article and kind of what the article is talking about. So that's the area that Paul and I are going to focus on, and then kind of just pick through the article and see what else is there. Okay, so Paul, let's talk about what was our first one? Gartner.
Gartner, and
you see, it's all going by so fast. I've completely forgotten. Yeah, Gartner. Gartner's How to Succeed in Digital Transformation. This came out actually July last year, but clearly these things are, continuing to be relevant. And as we know, we kind of hear about stuff in the field, various fields like Gen AI and so on, moving so fast, but digital transformation takes a long time. So a lot of the stuff that's in there actually is still very relevant. So, yeah, what were kind of your initial thoughts, Paul, on this report?
The difference in this one was that they'd done a sort of survey amongst quite a significant number of medium-sized enterprises. So the whole of this was really focused on probably a group of customers who've been somewhat underrepresented, I think, in some of the reports. You either get the digital native startups doing stuff or the very large organizations. And as you and I have said a number of times, there's a huge number of medium-sized and smaller companies out there struggling with AI and with any sort of IT, let alone AI.
Yeah.
And so this was very much focused on giving them some ideas about what they needed to do. So from that point of view, I thought it was not a bad thing for Gartner to be sort of giving some advice to those mid-sized companies that maybe have been a little underrepresented in the past. So, but at general level, it was nothing very spectacularly different in there. I don't, what was your thought?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think with your sort of assessment of it. For me, it was kind of the brevity. Really, it was kind of somewhat brief considering the actual subject itself. So it just seemed to be a little bit sort of on the light side.
It's a hook to get them into looking deeper into their content, but also their consulting. To me, it's felt a little bit like a hook, but there were some useful things in there. I mean, the one for me that came out, I mean, some of it was so sort of, so what? Like you need a strategy, and you need a sort of almost like a roadmap at the start. If you don't, it'll okay. Everybody needs to be more connected. IT need to be more connected to the business. And you go, we've been trying to do that for 30 or 40 years. This is nothing new. So there was nothing, but from my perspective, the one I thought was a little more relevant was that they'd actually managed to break out digital transformation, because I was concerned that digital transformation for most medium-sized enterprises, they wouldn't probably, the boards wouldn't understand quite what was involved in digital transformation. And I thought the breakout of that into AI for operational efficiency and AI to transform business models, i.e., being completely transformative,
Mm.
was a useful way. Because I think many medium-sized enterprises will look at that and go, "Phew," if you think they're in manufacturing or they're engineering, trying to make different business models for them
Yeah.
is probably a bit of a jump in on day one. But actually showing how AI can help with operational efficiency, I think, was quite well done. And so from that perspective, I thought, yeah, absolutely. And there was, yeah, even when we got around to some of the other issues around, culture and the sort of digital platform that you need to
Mm.
put together. There was some subtle, if I mean, as I say, they were very broad brush in many ways, but little sort of guides for medium-sized enterprises that I think they would have breathed a heavy sigh of relief about. Sometimes you get these big reports that say, "Oh, you need to do X, Y, Z."
Yeah.
And the companies you're talking to are at ABC. They haven't got as far, they're a million miles from being able to do some of these things. And there were one or two areas around cultural change and around where do you start in building a sort of digital platform that can help you with
Right.
the sort of front end customer change, end user change that you need to focus on.
Mm.
That I thought would just have got past the, if you could just imagine an IT director or a CIO in a medium-sized company trying to go to the board that's not very tech savvy and go, "Hey, we need to transform digital transformation." They wouldn't even know what it means. So I think there was a number of useful steps for
Yeah.
medium-sized enterprises that you wouldn't normally get in these reports, which tend to be focused on really tech savvy, large enterprises or digital startups. So I thought that was quite good.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, what I find, and this is kind of very in contrast, and kind of sort of juxtapositioning sort of the whole thing, is that the title of digital transformation for that size of organization is probably overwhelming.
Yes.
Now, in terms of the four key factors that the article or the report talks about, I found those underwhelming. So, the as you said rightly, the title DX title is probably a little bit too much for the board or the general manager or whatever of of that sort of SME. Whereas actually what they were saying, and again the wording I think was probably still overwhelming, but the actual factors themselves, and it identifies four factors as you mentioned. That was kind of really underwhelming. Those are kind of largely, as you said, well known, and we've been trying to do
Yeah.
those for a long time. So just to list out the four key factors, it's one is digital ambition, the other one is IT ops model, culture being the third one, and the fourth one is digital platforms. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, there was a lot I think you could probably pick on that, and maybe we can kind of go through a couple of those.
Yeah, I mean, the one for me that I was not uncomfortable with. I just felt it was something missing. There was almost like an elephant in the room that wasn't being addressed when you were talking about both the IT operating model and the digital platforms. Was about the back office legacy they've got. I don't want to use debt, digital debt, or anything like that, but legacy debt. But fundamentally, when you're talking about those types of businesses, they will be running, legacy, back office systems.
Yeah.
And there was no mention about what to do about those. Absolutely
Yes.
none. It was, we need these new sort of customer facing and, digital microservices based platforms, yada, 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 usual things that you get. And yet very little that says, what do I do with that back end? What do I do with the back end? And that's where most companies are going to come from, because they've got, they need to keep the lights on. What the hell are we supposed to do when?
Indeed. Yeah. So yes, I mean, things like the, define a clear and sort of compelling digital ambition. Again, I think, as I said, kind of the wording just sounded a little bit, awkward because it's a little bit too big for that kind of target, sort of enterprise, if you like.
Yeah.
So everything from articulating tangible business outcomes and digital revenues, developing new digital revenue streams, and so on. It just sounds very sort of high and mighty kind of conversation for for an SME.
Yeah.
So
I mean, some of these medium-sized companies are pretty large. I mean, they're not small companies by any means, but quite often they're in traditional industries. And you say
yeah,
to if you're an engineering company or a manufacturing company, what does your digital model look like? What does digital
yeah,
transformation mean to you? You're talking about new business, new sort of revenue streams. Well, if you're making machine parts, you sort of getting that you're going to confuse the people you're going to. So you need to be a bit more clear around is
yeah,
this around how do I create a more flexible environment, a more agile environment for
yes.
dealing with customers, etc.
Well, yeah.
And it was, I agree with you. It was sort of high and mighty stuff, and it was like,
Yeah, and this is what I'm saying. Kind of, just the wording just seemed to be for a different type of audience, a different type of, organization,
yeah,
really.
yeah,
So so that I think that kind of that first point, define a clear and compelling sort of digital ambition. Yeah, okay, well, that's an IT strategy, effectively. So yes, we ought to do that. But as we said, kind of whether those organizations kind of think of it that way and use that type of terminology and so on, maybe not. As you said, they might be kind of large in terms of their size. But what I find sometimes is that while the business side kind of grows, the IT, although technically might grow, the culture and kind of how it positions itself, how it portrays itself, the projection within the organization has not really moved forward that much. It's still, Trevor from tech support and Ali who kind of does our uh, notebooks or something, fixes our laptops and things like that. So it's kind of those guys. It's not like those guys over there that do our IT stuff in the cloud and Gen AI and things like that. So that kind of, I think, cultural progression is not really there, which again, so that took me to the other point about the culture, because again, the wording there was quite awkward,
mm,
and there wasn't really anything new there. It talked about things like collaboration, empowerment, and then customer centricity. But actually, it didn't say anything about enabling, reskilling, going from a sort of an old way of developing to a new way of developing. If you're kind of development heavy, for example, in terms of in-house applications, nothing about okay, so how would an SME kind of adopt things like platform engineering, because they can barely spell DevOps or understand what DevOps is, and let alone kind of do platform engineering or GitOps or anything complex as that.
At one point, I thought they were going to dive back into something that they were talking about probably 10 years ago, which was bimodal IT.
Yeah,
Where you have teams focused on the
yeah,
new stuff
yeah,
and other teams focused on keeping the lights on at the back end. And I thought, oh my God, here we go again, because I didn't like that concept because it left the back office and
yeah.
the legacy teams dangling in the wind as everything changed around it. And
So
I felt that
yeah,
was really difficult. But they didn't go there. Hence the
no,
elephant in the room. It was
yeah.
they just avoided the subject completely.
Yeah, and so and just on that sort of cultural point, I think and I don't know why kind of my head landed on this term, but I think it seems kind of appropriate, in that I think those types of organizations, or at least those that are doing DevOps and kind of looking at platform engineering and doing kind of containers and orchestration, and so on. I would call those kind of organizations digitally enlightened. So they know about these trends, they're aware of them, they're probably experimented with them, and they certainly have some of that stuff, not all of it, in production as well. It's in use in production, whereas these other kind of the SMEs are still on that journey. They're still kind of the early days of kind of using cloud and stuff like that, like DevOps and so on. And they're probably not actually doing that right now, but that should be obviously part of their sort of strategy going forward. But just the wording, I think, in the Gartner report, I just found it a little bit cumbersome in terms of who it was, the audience it was trying to address.
Yeah, I think we, as an industry, we struggle with this whole notion of what does digital transformation actually mean. I think if you're as you say, if you're a digital native startup, then you know exactly what it means. But for most organizations, it gets into, am I transforming my IT so it's a bit more agile, or am I transforming my business? And either of those terms tends to sort of strike fear into the hearts of most sort of senior management, because transformation takes, as you said right up front, transformation tends to take a long time and cost money, and therefore, that's why I quite like the idea, they were talking about some of the transformation, or certainly using AI, was around operational efficiency. And most businesses are going to go, God, if that can make me more efficient, I ought to be looking at it.
Yeah.
But if that's going to change my business model or make me disrupt the market somehow, as worthy as that might be, most mid-sized organizations are not going to be capable enough or competent enough to get their heads around that.
Yeah, and we actually, you and I spoke about, we defined what we understood digital transformation to be a long time ago on a previous Cloud State of Play episode, and then we talked about cloud transformation, cloud migration, app migration, and so on. So we did all of that. I'll try and dig up the episode for you guys to see if that makes a lot of sense still. But yeah, so I did pick up on that as well. And I mean, the report does kind of go on to some more recommended resources. So there's extra kind of resources that you can that you can look at as well, which is for each of the categories, which is quite interesting.
I think you'll find that a lot of those extra resources you have to sign up to Gartner for.
Most likely.
So
I didn't actually have a chance to look at this, I have to say.
Just be aware that there's a level of sort of not sort of fishing going on to get you to sign up, but nonetheless, they've given a little bit away, but the real gems are going to be in stuff that you're going to have to pay for.
Yeah, and I mean, it doesn't. There are kind of key findings and recommendations as well. So there's a whole bunch of those. But I think they just kind of seem to be retreading of the 4 factors. So again, talking about in the findings, key findings, shared vision of the digital, digital, what kind of digital means in the organization. Yeah, fair enough.
I think if they wanted to get medium-sized businesses, medium-sized enterprises to get excited about this and to come to Gartner for advice, I think they missed the boat. I think, as you say, by framing it and phrasing it the way they did, without really it just came across so bland, I think, that most people are going, oh yeah, not just another report on AI. Or transformation. Well, haven't got time for that now. It's the classic. I've got a battle to fight.
And it's interesting because the cultural aspect. I said they didn't seem to hit on everything around that. So it talks about collaboration. Okay, that can lend itself to to various sort of things. So rather than a simple one would be, rather than sending emails, you'd use, Slack or Teams or something. You DM people and kind of make it easier. And then that in a development, sort of environment, that would make sense. And you'd collab with people in terms of, development of code and working in various teams and doing proof of concepts and stuff like that as well.
I got I mean, I agree with you. I got the sense that when they use the term, you need to be customer centric, and you yawn, you go, yeah, of course, everybody needs. Actually, what they were trying to do, because one of the challenges I saw that with that was, why would I collaborate if actually my role is going to be become obsolete because I'm in one of the legacy areas, So that's the elephant in the room for me is what do you do with the existing skills you've got and resources you've got? How do you repurpose those? And you talked about that at the start. And how do you do that? And that was missing completely. And I thought, when I saw the customer centric piece, well, of course, nobody can argue that you shouldn't be customer centric. But just to say to your IT operations or all your IT staff, you need to be more customer centric, guys. They're going, yeah, right. You can just hear the sort of, oh yeah, right, okay.
Yeah.
What do I get out of this? And hence that'll unpick the collaboration, because they're going, why should I collaborate if it's not
true? Yes, absolutely. And like I say, I mean, I did mention the reskilling, so I think that would be, maybe an enabler for all these other things. If you're not really enabled and kind of reskilled for whatever the new digital sort of shift is going to be, then you can't really collaborate very well. You're certainly not empowered if you're not reskilled. So you don't have the power to take on stuff or be responsible and work with others in a kind of a leadership kind of role. And it's not, if you're not empowered, if you're not reskilled, then again, that's not going to reflect in customer centricity either. So yes, I think that's a big one that seemed to be missing, I think, from the report, which is quite disappointing. So the only other bit I wanted to mention on that aspect of it is the fact that there's already talks, kind of various people and influencers and so on, the kind of people in the Gen AI space, saying that actually organizations need to change their culture to either a full Gen AI culture or at least a Gen AI ready culture. So actually, we've always, there's always kind of these shifts have kind of come through, and we've said, every company is a software company, or every company is a blah blah. There's all these kind of things that get mentioned every now and then. So now I think the latest one seems to be, all of, not just your IT team or your data team or whatever, needs to be kind of Gen AI, ready or making use of Gen AI. But actually, all of the systems and your culture and your entire organization needs to be, Gen AI sort of compatible or ready, and that whole culture needs to change. So everything that you produce, even the data that you're producing from now on, it needs to be, ready for being, used or dropped into a Gen AI or queried through Gen AI or something like that. So not just kind of saying, we need to do a database schema because that database requires it this way, or we want the schema to look like this for this database. But it actually needs to be more targeted towards a Gen AI platform to be manipulated and used and accessed by a Gen AI platform versus just the database that is going to be stored in. So that is another culture shift, and obviously, the report doesn't really mention anything in regards to that.
And well, okay, I think the next topic we come on to might well get us back into this loop again. But I think that is less than helpful to say companies need to have a Gen AI culture. And we'll discuss this more in the Google one coming through, because I don't believe Gen AI itself is right for everything. AI might be, but again, we're now using Gen AI to cover all AI, and of course, you do that, you're going to get things wrong. There's some really good uses of AI that are not Gen AI, and so I shall push back on that in the next one.
All right, so let's just conclude with as I said, the key findings. So one was as we said, without a shared vision of what digital means, to their organization, mid-sized enterprises risk deploying their scarce resources. So they do recognize that the resources are scarce, to a set of disconnected digital initiatives. Additional approaches to technology delivery can't achieve the speed, agility, and value that digital businesses require. So yeah, okay, so traditional approaches to technology, yeah, can't help you, sure. Transforming a business is a profound change. Yes, no S, Sherlock. That frequently clashes with previous mindsets and behavior. And this is what we said about leaving people behind, and those people that, if you're not going to reskill them, then they're not going to want to know. Legacy applications and infrastructure are designed to be operated centrally by an IT team, impeding the distributed delivery of digital capabilities. So yeah, okay, that's kind of, I think, makes sense. It's a pity that like I said, the mindset and behavior stuff they didn't hit on a little bit more earlier in the report. Yeah. Okay, and then the recommendations say, okay, so to be successful in executing your digital business initiatives, you need to develop a clear and compelling digital ambition. Sure. Design an IT operating model. So that's your cloud operating model, or whatever you want to kind of call it, that enables IT to be more proactive. Evolve to a digital ready culture. So that's kind of close to what I was saying, by focusing on collab, okay, and empowerment and customer centricity. And then lay out the digital platforms that enable teams to safely build digital capabilities. Okay, yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of just rewording the same thing, kind of put the earlier text through ChatGPT, I think, and got those 4 recommendations. But yeah, okay, I think like I said, it's the overall thing for me is that it just seems to be kind of a little bit awkward with the with the wording, and the I think just it's certainly missing a few areas for that type of market, that type of customer, the SME customer.
Agreed.
Hey, if you are enjoying the content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That would really help me out. Thank you. Right, so let's move on to our second one, which is Google AI Business Trends Report 2025. Now, as I said, this was actually a really big report in terms of the file size, but it seems to be quite ambitious on kind of graphics and making it interactive and things like that. So good quality report in terms of the graphics and the formatting, but we'll see what the content quality is like in a minute as we go through it. So this is something published in, I got the email in February or March, and then yeah, that was from Google. So I alerted Paul in regards to that, and then we had a conversation. We thought, oh, okay, let's actually talk about this, because this is, from Google Cloud themselves. So it's kind of focusing on, AI and so on. So it says the 2025 report by Google Cloud explores the evolution and impact of AI, especially Gen AI, across industries. It highlights how businesses are moving beyond experimentation, really, are they? And are now deploying AI at scale to boost productivity. Right. Okay. So,
and it's interesting. One of their graphics showed that currently 10% are already deploying AI agents, and 82% are planning to integrate them within the next 3 years, which can be as long as a piece of string, really. But
yes.
but that's that was just Google, I think, trying to be over enthusiastic to start with.
I think so. I mean, I think so just immediately off the bat, I attended the, I don't know if you can, I don't know if my hands are, the Gen AI Summit a couple of weeks ago. This was a really interesting summit because the majority of the presenters were customers. They were just enterprises. Okay, they were all financial enterprises. They were like banks and financial institutes, and Financial Times was there. Telcos were there like BT and so on. Retail banks like Santander. Then you had NatWest, you had Lloyd's, you had Barclays. So quite a big representation kind of from the financial side. There was a reason, first of all. So my interest in the summit was because of that, because it was customers talking, not vendors talking, not consultancies talking. So kind of wheel out the Deloittes and Accentures of the world and whatever. Nor was it kind of Google or Microsoft or I don't know, Anthropic, who not the kind of usual sort of suspects in terms of Gen AI. It was actually enterprises talking, and they were talking very deeply about their projects. They kind of some of the slides they actually put up on the screen were a little bit too revealing. I was kind of sitting there going, are you sure you want to kind of show that level of detail on your architecture, how you've done this at at NatWest or whatever? So yeah, but anyway, point being is that was the attraction for me. That's kind of why I attended. Now, the other point for me then, kind of looking at this now, this report and this summary, is that there was a good reason why the majority of the people actually presenting were from the finance sector, because finance always has a lot more money to throw at pilots and POCs and tests and demos and MVPs and what have you, because they have deeper pockets. They can actually afford to do this and actually throw both resources and and money at doing something like this. And I'll mention the other point a little bit later on, because I think that comes in when we maybe talk a little bit about timescales, which you hit on. But yeah, so that I think kind of Gen AI seems to have kind of catalyzed a wave of rapid innovation, if you like. So it kind of shows the pace, is not slowing down. It's not going to slow down. Well, we know that, right, Paul? So it's an arms race. We know it's an arms race. It's a new frontier. It's the gold rush, right? So we know that already.
Yeah. Yes. I suppose as I read it through, there's some useful, interesting points that we'll get to. But my general one was, it's Google. They would say that because they've got such an investment in making sure we all, use AI and goes on. But I mean, there are some challenges ahead in the marketplace. It's interesting. They were talking about growth of data centers, the growth of 33% through to 2030.
Yeah, I picked up on that as well.
And there are already potential roadblocks to that in terms of power availability, certainly in the UK, in Ireland, in various geographies. If you want to build a new AI data center in the UK, there's a moratorium at the moment of getting onto the power grid. So there's a queue. If you start today, you'll get on the power grid in 2030. And actually the queue was so big for that the government has put in a temporary moratorium for people requesting new access to the grid. So there's that challenge. And then I just think there's been a slight tail off, I think, in terms of the investment going into it, and I think there's been just a little bit of a pullback on investment. And again, of course, that's the danger of writing any report. You write the report and publish it, and something happens. And I think some of the changes, both in terms of power issues, sustainability, but also the trade disruption that's going on at the moment, has just slowed the amount of available capital for some things. So again, there are some headwinds. Doesn't take away from the fact that AI is, I'm very positive about what AI can do, for business and for the world, really. But I think there's a level of, we need a level of resetting expectations, because at the moment they're running ahead. But there was some, again, we can come back to some interesting points on the various areas they're looking at.
Yeah. So I mean, it does identify, I think, was it a top 5 trends, I think, that it picked up on. So it says multimodal AI being one, because this is a really hardcore sort of Gen AI report. It's by Google Cloud, so it's the GCP, boys, and it's Gen AI and that kind of focus. So, multimodal AI. So it's picking up the in regards to that, talking about unleashing the power of context.
It's interesting, of course. They don't use the term Gen AI that much, and I like that, because I was going to pull it up and say, actually, this is about AI in all its forms, not just Gen AI. And this multimodal one, I think, it's the number one, isn't it, that they put up? I don't know whether they see that as the most important, but it's certainly, I think, the one that's probably developed the most short-term opportunities in healthcare and places like that. And by multimodal, obviously, we need to describe actually what you're doing is taking photos, scans, voice, everything, as well as text, and giving extra context to the way in which the AI makes its decisions, and therefore make better decisions. And we've seen tremendous strides in healthcare, in pharmaceuticals, areas like that, because it's ideally suited for the sort of how do you pick out a tumor from a scan, that more effectively than the human eye could do, and all those sort of things, So I think that was number one. I'm going, I was, for me that was a real tick. Yes, I can see that.
Yeah. So that's I mean, that's definitely, I think, has come out of the sort of the developments in the last sort of 18 months or so. And that's, I think that's really, the not the maturity, but certainly the advance and evolution of the large language models and kind of the capabilities that we've seen in the last sort of 12 months, 18 months. And then it talks about AI agents, as you said. So the evolution of from chatbots to multi-agent systems. I mean, that's really at its infancy at the moment. There's a up until I think last week, there was only one protocol that allowed the agents to actually communicate. Otherwise, it was all proprietary and API based and what have you. But now, thanks to Anthropic, that's Model Context Protocol, I think it's called, MCP, is kind of allowing agents to be able to actually communicate. And obviously, Google at Google Cloud Next also announced their one. I can't remember what their one's called. A2A, I think, agent to agent, I think it's called. So again, they're now comparing those. People complaining about they're not secure and kind of blowing holes in those and comparing them against each other and so on. But certainly, I think that AI agent area is going to evolve.
I think that's the right term. It's going to evolve, and obviously, this was the stat that said only 10% of businesses are actually using these AI agents at the moment in real life, and because of the hype, everybody thinks every time they talk to an AI, an agent, a chatbot, they're talking to an AI. I mean, I had one yesterday with a telco that will remain unnamed to protect itself. That was, there was no AI in this at all. In the end, it gave up and said, "Oh, I'm going to have to connect you to somebody who can help."
It's just wasted your time for 15.
Why did I spend half an hour trying to get you to realize you're going to have to put me through to somebody else? So I think that's early days. And one of the interesting things about the agentic AI piece, i.e. the multi-agents, is it gets very complicated. Never mind the fact you haven't got the protocols to communicate. If you're slightly unsure on the whether the agent is hallucinating, if you think one report recently said something like 1 in 5, about 20% of responses have some sort of hallucination in them. You start chaining agents together. And you're going, jeepers, where's the hallucination happening there now?
It's going to be a AI Chinese whispers, right? I
Yeah.
think. Well,
Yeah.
the first agent gets it right. By the time it gets to the fifth agent, it's
Yeah.
completely wrong.
It's the old
90% hallucinations.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
send the message from the front is send reinforcements, we're going to
yeah,
advance. By
yeah,
the time it gets to headquarters, it's send reinforcements, we're going to advance.
yeah, exactly.
And so there's a danger, and I think the danger of the hype of AI is that you over spec it, or you over hype it,
Mm.
and expectations not met, and then you get this sort of dip, the old classic Gartner trough of disillusion,
Yes, yeah,
and
but that,
there's a
yeah,
danger of that.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I agree. So that's okay. So that's kind of the AI agents is the second of the five top trends. Third one, which was interesting, assistive search. Now, for me, it says the next frontier for knowledge work. Okay, yeah. So I mean, you can kind of drop search into kind of the work environment and be able to focus on that. But the problem, I think, area that I see for those that are those platforms that are sort of public facing, like for example Google search. Okay, so the Google search is now getting I think or it's receiving Gemini inputs as well. So actually when you do a Google search, Gemini sort of appears at the top. When you do it on your phone or on desktop or whatever, Gemini is there. But the problem is kind of it's almost kind of a reluctant way to kind of get AI into a Gen AI into the searches, into the web searches, because normally you would expect to, if you speak to a Gen AI and prompt it on something or ask it something, you're expecting an answer. You're not expecting like a million hits on flip flops or sandals or something like that, right? So Gen AI in search is almost dead against what a Google search platform is. So I'm not surprised Google's taking so long to to implement it. And when they have implemented it, they've kind of put it next to the normal search. So you get the Gemini description at the top, but then you still get your million hits for sandals
And
as well.
it's the same with Bing and Microsoft, and
Yeah, all the but it's also not just limited to the web searches. It's also things like the Amazon shopping. So when you go to Amazon shopping and and type in sandals or something, you get like a million hits. But what I would like to see is for me to prompt what the sandals should look like, and then for the Amazon search to give me the exact what I'm looking for, and the seller that's actually selling those sandals, or maybe the top 5 or top 3 or something. But again, this goes against, just like Google search, it goes against the idea of the searches, and eBay is obviously in the same boat as well as Temu and all the other sort of online shopping and so on. Is that their whole concept for the search, the whole model for the search, is geared towards giving you thousands of hits, because that is how they do their advertising. That is how they attract sellers and so on. So if they're going to change that whole search to just giving you the exact answer, there goes Google Ads basically, and the revenue from that.
I agree. I mean, it worries me too from a sustainability point of view that every time you're doing Google searches now, Gemini or OpenAI, if you're using Bing, is coming in, and I think they've already proven that if you put in a Google search and you get a Gen AI one as well, the Gen AI piece is 10 times more resource hungry than the Google search itself. The straight Google search. So, given all our other challenges with sustainability, and as you say, that challenge for the existing business model, I think it's a strange move. But the other thing you brought up, which I think which again is not really being brought out, is the way in which prompts are put together. And I think there's an awful lot of education, I think, for people generally, whether that's business people or consumers, to understand how you prompt to get the answers you need. At the moment, we're wasting an awful lot of cycles, I'm sure, or not getting the answers at all. I mean, funny story. I know Alexa is not very, very smart anyway. But
No,
when my wife asked the question, Alexa, are you dumb? Are you stupid? Alexa replied, I do try and improve. And I thought, oh, this poor,
it's not as
poor.
dumb as not as dumb as Apple Intelligence, that's for sure. So
Yeah. So it's sort of, but the reason she got to that point was that the way in which she prompted for questions was leaving Alexa unable to answer the question because she wasn't smart enough. She didn't have the context, all those sort of issues. And I think generally, if you look at this, it's going to slow down some of the real uptake of this and until
yeah,
broadly we learn how to speak to the AI.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so yeah, so that's the assistive search. So like I said, the enterprise side of it I think is okay because we've seen it augmented with
Yeah.
things like Microsoft Copilot and stuff like that. So that's fine. And that will search through your PDFs and PowerPoints and other people's kind of productivity or SharePoint and everything else. You can kind of point it to your SharePoint and so on. And that's fine. Yeah, I would like to actually see that because that is useful to see. And those who are adopting things like Copilot for their enterprise, that makes a lot of sense. But I just think the externally facing search
Yeah, it's crazy.
is just it's in a head-on collision with
Yeah.
the concept of that type of search, whether it's a web search or a shopping search or whatever it is. I think it's dead against how that's supposed to work.
But I think
as a model.
we're still in the phase, even in the sort of the assisted search at an enterprise level of making sure there's the man in the middle, the person in the middle. Because if AI is hallucinating on a 20% basis, you have to be the man in the middle, the person in the middle. God, I've got to learn to say person, not man, haven't I? You've got to learn to get into that position where you have to research yourself some of the things it said. You can't just take it as the gospel truth.
Yeah.
And for me as an analyst, that's absolutely critical. I'm quite happy to use ChatGPT to give me a framework of something I'm trying to write, and it then throws up some of the places it's got its facts from.
Information from.
And you have to go and double check that.
Yeah.
You really do as an analyst. And then you have to look at it and say, is that written in the right way that the audience is going to understand? Because
that's true. Yeah.
I mean, it is quite strange on particularly LinkedIn that you can see all the articles that somebody has literally just put a prompt in, got the response and pasted it straight into LinkedIn. And you think, spot ChatGPT versus Gemini, different ways of displaying the answers. You think, I know exactly where that came from.
Yeah, and so that's, I think that's another issue that, although Gen AI is helping us to kind of generate all this content, a lot of the content that it's generating is mush, so it's trivial. Okay, so the fourth one on the top 5 trends is AI-powered customer experience. So seamless, it's almost invisible. It says customer engagement and enterprise search apps combined to make customer experience seamless. Customer service and support was the #1 priority for the new Gen AI initiatives of over 65 or for 65% of organizations in the next 12 months. So yes, but I think these are still glorified chatbots. And one of the conversations I had, and one of the presenters actually at the Gen AI Summit was NatWest. So they were actually talking about Quora, which is their sort of chatbot, their first generation chatbot. And they were talking now about Quora Plus, which they've been working on. The POC for that, the pilot for that has been running for the since June last year, and that's actually going to run to June of this year. So it's obviously still probably not in production until 2026, most likely, until it kind of jumps through all the legal hoops and everything else as well. So yes, but it's these things take a long time. And right now, even the likes of NatWest, as we said, big financials, got deep pockets, they can do this kind of stuff. It's just chatbots right now. All they're looking at is improving their chatbots. So if they're focusing mainly on their kind of chatbot sort of, activities there, what is that, SME that we talked about in the previous Gartner report basically doing, right? So they're even further from, achieving anything in regards to Gen AI, let alone kind of putting that into production.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, it was back to you in the previous section we were reviewing. You were talking about, I want to be able to go on and put in exactly the style of sandal I want and get the exact answer to it. And this is it's one heck of a challenge. This is if you think about the way in which we interact with systems, but also the way in which we decide how to, what we want to buy and how we want to buy it, or the problems we have. I mean, you're talking about AI agents that are supposedly helping you out with your technical issues, and you look at the range of technical issues there might be in a sort of digital supply chain, even where your problems with email, they're looking at, is it a problem with the router? Is it a problem with the email software? Is it a problem with the configuration? Oh my goodness me, you're using Outlook as well as a web-based one. What have you done with Outlook? And the current AI agents can't handle that.
Yes.
They can't handle that. And somebody will come up with something they can't handle. Therefore, businesses have got to think, how do I quickly get them through to something? So it's an assistive technology, but I don't think it's going to take over the world for a while yet. It'll get better.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot to be said, and people kind of seem to dismiss this, I think too quickly, in that there's that kind of in terms of sort of Gen AI sort of progression, and one of the stages was this kind of augmented Gen AI kind of augmenting existing systems, and I'm really disappointed to see a lot of people feeling that this and putting out kind of opinions that this is not the way to do it. I think this is actually a very good way to bring in Gen AI into existing platforms that people have invested in, trained on, are used to using, and so on. Yeah, I don't mind an AI assistant, helping me with my Teams meeting. It can take my notes for me. It can take all the actions, who said what, and so on, which I actually do use, right now for meetings. And you get it in Zoom now and everything else as well, if you're a subscriber. So I think that's the way to kind of augment existing systems is a very good way to introduce. And I think what we'll find is a lot of those people who kind of dismissed it are probably going to eat their words in regards to that, because I think that's a very good way to start things off. What's wrong with that? I don't see any problem with the existing systems, getting that sort of augmented Gen AI sort of capability, introducing Gen AI, functions and features and so on, assisting, with the current use of that system or that platform, and then eventually, we can kind of move on from that platform. But right now, I think it's a really good way to bring in Gen AI and actually make it, affordable and practical. You can actually use, the tools right now.
Yeah, and I think it's also an opportunity for Gen AI itself to learn from practical experience.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think that's the whole point. One of the issues and challenges that people are seeing with AI is that if we keep relying on AI to give us the answers, eventually we'll get a much smaller stock of answers that aren't necessarily the best, or they've ignored the new stuff coming through because they're just going around their own little loop, you know. So again, how do you keep training? And I think that's a great way of training them if on a sort of an augmented basis. So yes, I'm absolutely behind you on that one.
Yeah. Okay. And then the top, the fifth top five trend, the fifth one is security gets tighter and tougher with AI. So, I mean, in terms of tighter, sure, but that's kind of again trying to really, you know, bring in AI. I think the issue that we seem to be saying, you know, like I said, the best way for me forward is augmenting the existing systems, like we've had with GitHub Copilot, you know, very successful. Microsoft Copilot, very successful. So when you augment the existing system, I think that's a good introduction, good way to do things. The other issue, I think, you know, with things like security or development, you know, code development or whatever, people just seem to be very, you know, polarized on it. It's either no, it's going to be a disaster and it's going to make everybody, you know, redundant, to the point of actually, no, it's fantastic because it's going to save us a lot of money. And there isn't anything kind of compromising and in between. And I think that augmented option is the bit in between. There's a lot of, you know, people are on the two sides of the, you know, two sides of the coin, on, you know, different sides of the camp or whatever. And they're not really kind of meeting in the middle of that spectrum. And I think, like I said, the middle of that spectrum is the augmentation. But people are talking about, you know, okay, so we bring it into security, but where is it going to work in security? Is it going to just replace the people who are doing the security? Now we just rely on the AI to do the security for us. You know, it's very, I think it's very difficult to see how that's going to play out if you kind of in these two opposing camps.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, one of the challenges is, you know, again, the sort of advocates for AI use all over the place are jumping ahead of our ability to implement it. You know, and but also not taking into sort of consideration human frailty. So for example, one of the earlier ones was about sort of agents, and they were talking about code agents. And you just mentioned, you know, about code, automated coding. And when it comes to security, how do you know that it's picked up the latest security policies or the latest sort of you know, libraries of you know, security things that they need to pick up, and they haven't picked up an older version? In which case, you've just coded something that's got a known problem with it. Yet, unless you have the person in the middle, and hence this is the augmentation, isn't it? So I think the role of developers is going to change. It isn't going to go away. You might get code faster, but there will still need to be this sort of, and you know, will we ever get to a point where we completely trust AI? I mean, you know, okay, motor cars, you know, the old story of, you know, men walking in front with red flags. There was no driving test, and then they had to have a driving test. There was no highway code, then they had to have a highway code. We're in the same sort of base, so we're going to be facing some of these issues as we go along. So that was my only, you know, overarching concern with the Google trends, was it tend to paint the rosy picture all along without balance. And I think, you know, it is a balance. I'm still positive about AI. We need to be realistic.
Yeah, and I think what I was saying kind of seems to be, you know, in that fifth trend about security getting tighter. On page 42 of the report, it does say, okay, so here's kind of the use cases for AI in security. So I don't think it really matters in terms of the percentage, but it just says rule creation, attack simulation, and compliance violation detection. So all of those, I think, for me, are augmenting the existing system, right? They're not, you know, you're not kind of creating something, you're just saying, okay, you know, I've now given Gen AI, you know, full control of my security, and it does all of my stuff for me. And it just tells me when there are breaches and problems and how to fix them. And so, no, so all of this stuff, you know, how can we make use of AI? Well, it can help us create some rules, right? It can simulate attacks. So it can create a simulated attack based on what we've prompted it. Great. It can help us with, compliance detection, violation detection rather for on compliance and so on. Fantastic, yeah, because we're feeding it that stuff. So all of that is the augmented side of using Gen AI in security, not the just letting Gen AI sort of loose on our security and saying, yeah, our network is over there, our rules are here, so you go and sort it out for us. Yeah, that's but the way that the kind of people talk about that sort of thing is just seems like that's what they're discussing and aiming for, where actually they've missed that augmentation step. That needs to be the first step before you go into those kind of crazy things. And as you said, I don't know if we can trust it 100%. I think what we'll probably see is that, this augmentation sort of stage will probably reassert itself. People will just automatically, gravitate towards those types of solutions and not the fully automated, you don't need a human being for it.
Yeah, I mean, the danger, of course, is, and this is just human nature, is that people will, jump ahead and try and do this completely automatically, and it will be the big, security disaster in terms of breach or, hack or something that makes people say, hold on a minute, we need to do something different, or even regulate it. I mean, all those sort of issues come in, and I don't think this will be any different than anything else. The one other challenge, of course, coming in, particularly for security, is quantum. I don't quite know where AI sits then in that particular spectrum, but if quantum can do what it's supposed to be able to do in terms of cracking encryption and the like, you need a quantum computer. So you need a quantum computer to catch a quantum computer, if you see what I mean. Therefore, this might become a little academic in this particular sphere. AI won't be academic in many spheres, but it might be in security. I don't know.
Yeah, and the main points that I picked up as well all seem to be kind of really, pointing the same thing. So you've got things like, AI development is maturing rapidly. Over 50% of surveyed organizations are scaling AI beyond the pilot projects. Yeah, okay, maybe, but I think a lot of those are kind of chatbots or, like I said, augmented systems. Number two, Gen AI is driving tangible business outcomes. Sure. Faster time to market, improved customer service. There we go. Chatbots and kind of customer support agents or marketing content generation. Yeah, that's all. Yeah, that's what it was built for. That makes a lot of sense. Number three, cross-functional collaboration is essential. Success in AI strategies involves collaboration between IT, data science, and blah, blah, blah. We know that already. That's kind of regurgitating. AI Center of Excellence. Now, that's interesting because I think we do need an incubation, just like incubation teams, just like when we were going from the data center into the cloud, we had incubator teams to work on cloud, open source, and kind of put something together, rig something together that we could demo to the board. I think we need the same thing for AI. So an AI Center of Excellence. I think I actually mentioned that somewhere before.
You did.
Yeah. So that makes a lot of sense. And then number four, security and data governance. Okay, we just talked about that, our top priorities. Sure. With increased AI use, businesses are prioritizing data privacy, model explainability. Now that's a really, model weights is a really big one, I think. And obviously cybersecurity as well, because it can be used, in harmful ways, not just for protection. And then the fifth one is AI agents and multimodal AI are the next frontier. Yeah, okay, can't argue with that. I think that makes sense. And that's, again, ironically kind of going back to, they do quote actually Gartner in this report. So it says Gartner for the security side says, Gartner predicting by 2028, 50% of enterprises will adopt product, services, and features specifically to address disinformation security. So again, that's very interesting. Okay, so what's your conclusions on this report, Paul? What's your kind of final words on it?
I think I mean, it's useful in the way that it splits it up in the way it does. I think it gives people a sort of a great view of the different areas that you can actually be addressing. So I think from that point of view, and I think, very positive, terms. I was quite pleased it didn't just generally talk about Gen AI, but it actually looked at the sort of business issues and business cases and brought some specific use cases in. I thought it was all very useful. It's just, I think there is still the danger with reports like these that we forget these stages in between. And don't overhype it. So, yes, it's Google. Of course, they've got some sort of skin in the game and want to make sure that AI, generates the sort of business for them that they hope it's going to do. But I think largely it's a very positive looking report with lots of useful information in it. But just, almost what's happened in the last couple of months is making us think that there are some sort of stumbling blocks ahead that we need to be aware that AI isn't going to suddenly come racing to the rescue in the next couple of years. It's going to be a journey. But no, I generally the way it's done, the interaction capability. I thought it was a very useful way of doing it, rather than it could have been a very heavy report, and that's just quite easy to get through and then link through to some of the other content behind it. So yeah, positive.
Yeah, I just think the size of the report was heavy. So in terms of graphics,
89 megabytes.
89 megs, yeah, not that much content, but yeah, I think you did point out one thing though, which was interesting, that it does actually have links within it as well. So it takes you out to other stuff, Gartner and various other actual
It'd be a good resource for people.
Definitely. Hey, if you are enjoying the content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That would really help me out. Thank you. Okay, so let's move on to what is edge computing. Now, this is based on a Newstack article called "Are Your Apps Truly Nomadic?" by a chap called Derek Collison. This was published in March, so yeah, very recent. I have no idea who Derek Collison is. I didn't really bother looking up. I just thought I'll kind of, face value, look at what the report was. Paul, where do we start on this one?
Well, again, this is one of the things as an analyst, you're always taught, or as a historian, you're always taught, look at where the person who's writing it is coming from. What's their angle, and this, Derek Collison has developed a platform called Nats, Nats.io. So he's trying to generate, if you like, almost like a niche market that he can drop his application into. So there's a little bit of him trying to create a storyline that I think was quite difficult for him to create, or I don't think he necessarily went about it the right way. He was talking about these nomadic apps. And you and I had a discussion about, does he mean nomadic in the sense that, if you put a sensor or you've got a computer in a car and the car's moving, therefore it's nomadic? Or was it nomadic in the terms that he was trying to describe, which was this sort of absolute commonality from edge to cloud? And he was going far out, to oil rigs and so he had this sort of view that, and you and I think both thought that he was trying to talk about total portability from the edge device to the cloud. And I think you and I both agree that that's, whether it's feasible or not, whether that's desirable is another matter.
So I don't think it was the first description, although that's quite a funny one. I didn't even consider that, to be honest. Actually moving stuff stuff that moves like cars and whatever. Although how would you move a factory? So that wouldn't work.
No, it doesn't. But then a lot of the article had those sort of conflicts in it that you think, oh, it's this, and then you go, no, it can't.
It's not that. Okay, so NAS, just in case anybody's kind of wondering, NAS stands for Neural Autonomic Transport System. Make of that what you will. You can check it out at nats.io. It's partly an open source project maintained by Synadia Communications, and it's on an Apache license 2.0. So there you go. Now, yeah, I think there's, it's kind of trying to do the, right once, run anywhere sort of, Java sort of kind of thing, but maybe with a kind of sprinkling of PaaS kind of thrown in, because you could kind of, you can have sort of message queuing systems and, and various other things that ecosystem, the NATS ecosystem kind of throws into it, I presume.
So,
I have to say, I've not kind of looked into
I mean,
all of the details of that, but it was quite interesting to see that.
its fundamental design and fundamental concept is a replacement for existing messaging systems on the basis that he felt that, the way in which the existing messaging systems worked were difficult to integrate, scale, all the sort of questions, and he really was trying to get to grips with that. Great, fine, but he sort of then turned it into at its core, it's like Spark, it's like MQTT, it's like any messaging traffic, but it seems to be, it's open source, it seems to be scalable, it seems to be integrate with a whole load of stuff. But he's trying to build a platform on top of that, which allows you to develop applications, but also to manage data. I mean, and there was less info on that. So God knows what where the direction of travel is for that. So it is, you're right, it's more like a PaaS at the moment on which you can develop stuff. But I think the sort of concept that it got was that you have this sort of single portable app or application right through the stack.
Yeah.
And it was based on the premise too, that which I don't think is necessarily correct. He was sort of slightly unclear, but almost that virtually all the data you collect will go back to the center.
Yeah, and I think the issues that I had was, I don't think, there's a reason why you have certain platforms or certain solutions for certain platforms, so like in the cloud, you've got, various things that you do there and APIs and stuff like that. For IoT, it's kind of a very minimal sort of thing because you're constrained, your resources are constrained, and the device itself is, small on resources, processing, memory, IO, and things like that. So I think this has been attempted before several times, where you can you start with something very core, and you go, okay, that works on my Raspberry Pi or my IoT device, great, okay, or it works on some kind of production factory system or something like that. It kind of starts as very small sort of microcode or something that you can make use of, and kind of that becomes your core, and you kind of write your app maybe around that. But then as the application, in terms of where you're applying it, not the app as in the program, but the application of where you're putting it kind of goes somewhere else. So it goes to a hospital, it goes to a school, it goes to a ship, it goes to a tank, in the battlefield or whatever, or it goes into a plane or goes to a car. The emphasis of what you need, that core sort of module to do for you, will start changing because there's different demands, either from the infrastructure that is going to run on, so the hardware or device or something, or the communication, or the nature of the actual program that's running on it, streaming and so on, and event driven, etc. So I think there is no way to do that unless the thing is dynamic and says, oh, I'm now running in a tank, so I don't need these modules, I'll only install these modules. Oh, now I'm on a plane, so I don't need those modules that were in a tank, I need these modules, and so on. So I think it's very difficult to try and tick all the boxes, with just one solution, one PaaS platform that does it all for you. Even if the actual service that you want from it is the same one, is a streaming service, or it's a queuing service, or it's a security service or whatever. because even security is kind of different depending on where you are and what you're doing and what the platforms that you're running on, what the program of the app needs from you as well as a kind of a PaaS module, if you like.
Yeah, I don't disagree. When you looked, I sort of dug into the Nats website a bit more just to try and understand what's going on. And the core of what they were doing was that communications one you were talking about. You know, what happens when you've got poor communications. Now, I'm not technically competent to tell me whether he's cracked that issue, but it's certainly where they were aiming at. But they were also, aiming at, one of the challenges in the environment is all the different sources of data, getting that data back in a format and in a cleansed state so that the central systems can do something with it, but doing that virtually on the fly, and this is, his data management thing. And I couldn't, in the short time I was looking at it, get any real sense of how he did that. There are companies out there who have, data management companies who spent a long time trying to provide, data cleansing and data deduplication and all those sort of issues, and get it as near real time as possible. But it's very difficult to do it right out at the edge. So, okay. Because you've got so many different types of format, we haven't even mentioned the operational technology or industrial IoT with all their different formats. Now, again, working with partners, they seem to have cracked some of that. A German company called iFlow looked like, very much focused on the manufacturing side. Seems to have helped them crack that. But generally, I just felt he was trying to create his own market space. Although I shared with you the canonical stuff and their micro Kubernetes, what they call microcates, which, we talk about because the articles seem to suggest you could run it anywhere from the edge to the central cloud database. And the answer is yes, you probably can, but why would you? And why would you need to? And would it be the right thing?
Exactly.
And so that's the issue, not so much can you make it portable across the lot? Yes. And you look at what Canonical's done, you can almost certainly make that portable right across the piece. But why would you?
Yeah, is it the right thing to do? Is it the right solution? Because if you're actually in the public cloud, if you're going to now, you've taken the the design of whatever you're doing from the edge all the way into the public cloud. In the public cloud, I would want to use one of the XKS services. So I'd use an EKS, GKE, AKS, whatever it is, because that's what's geared for that type of environment.
And as long as the APIs and the information, the data coming across can come across seamlessly. Why would you use the little thing that you were using out on the edge in a cloud environment? It didn't make sense.
And it's not, you don't even have to go that far. You don't have to even get for that kind of edge thing. I would argue things like OpenShift has got its place where you can run it, but that doesn't mean you can run it you're not going to try and put that into an IoT device just because OpenShift has got all these wonderful things in it. You could go, oh, can I put that on the edge? Maybe. I don't know. You might need an actual proper PC to do that. One of those kind of mini, whatever, ruggedized PCs to do it. Whereas actually, maybe if you'd looked at this solution, for example, the NAS solution, maybe we could have done the same thing using an IoT device. It was much smaller, cheaper, easier to manage and so on. So I think it's horses for courses, and I think that's the problem that I mainly see. Like I said, you're kind of trying to address everything or every environment with that. And then the other point that I kind of, fundamentally disagreed with was the definition of edge computing. It just seemed to be kind of, shaped, in accordance with what needed to be said. And I don't think it's that kind of malleable in that way. I don't think you kind of, shape it that easily, because when you pragmatically come to actually do it, you're back to, what does my stack look like? What does my software stack look like? And again, that same question comes up. Why am I running or trying to run, NATs in a public cloud? That doesn't make sense. Or or the opposite of that, trying to run OpenShift on an IoT device. It's the horses for courses again when you come to actually looking at the design and the architecture of what you're doing. And that's why I think, certain pieces of software that have been written, or platforms that have been written, or solutions, for particular platforms, are designed for those platforms. They're aimed with that platform in mind, largely. Can you take them and put them somewhere else? Maybe. But is that kind of, as you said, is that the best thing to do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, edge has been so widely used as a term, and probably wrongly. You and I have had the discussion, and I push back a little bit in the sense that a lot of what you and I have talked about has been this sort of software stack, and there's only so far down out to the edge you can take that stack. And regional data centers, yes, you could probably take it down to a large factory and put the stack out there. But the minute you get out to an oil rig, would you do it out there? No, you would. Would you put it in a car? No, you flipping well wouldn't.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, edge computing has been so used as a term that I don't know. We need to find some other way of describing. But he was. I just felt he was conflicted on a number of times when he was trying to get his story across. And I'll dig out the blog that was on the site that I actually thought came at it from a completely different direction, which was, what's the problem you're trying to solve? And the article really wasn't about what's the problem you're trying to solve. He was trying to make the case for his particular nomenclature, his particular view of the world. And actually, there was a blog on the NATS site that came at it the other way around and gave some examples of the code you wrote to deal with it. Now, I couldn't understand the code to save my life, but the actual issue they were trying to solve is the classic issues that you get out from the edge in terms of data integrity, not duplication of messages going out, and all those sort of things that where you've got multiple devices, and multiple steps and hops. Seemed to be that they were addressing those issues, which I thought was quite useful, but he's taken it too much far forward.
Yeah. And it says that the article is exploring the concept of nomadic applications, software system design operates seamlessly across diverse environments, including cloud, on-premises, and edge computing platforms. So I think that immediately, like I said, I fundamentally disagree with that, because it clashes with that, as I said, that kind of, the horses for courses. You need these things when you're in a public cloud, but you don't need them when you're running them in an IoT device, and vice versa. The IoT, a PaaS that's kind of designed for IoT, let's say, will be fundamentally missing a whole bunch of stuff if you try and run that in a public cloud. You try and drop it into AWS or something. Sure, can it run? Well, yeah, we can make a lot of things run, but are they actually any useful? Are they going to do what we want? And are they going to have the longevity as we progress and innovate what we're doing with that particular project? Is this thing going to scale with us? Is it able to cope with our future demands? Not just, oh yeah, it can do all these things, tick a box, it works. That's not enough, I think, for the type of agility that we want these days from our platforms and applications.
No, I agree. I think that's absolutely right. And I think, what we've got to get to is, have we got the ability for seamless transfer of information between the end user device and wherever you want to send it, and what you want to do with it. So, APIs, we've got to have better, standard APIs. We've got to have that transparency of what's happening out there, which is very different from portability.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, so the thing I maybe kind of wanted to circle back to was, what is edge? So, I think you and I have had this conversation before. So, so we could, for me, it's relatively simple in terms of I look at it always kind of from the platform that's potentially going to run the app or run the service for us, on the edge. So IoT devices in general would be definitely part of that kind of edge family. So they run certain applications, they do a certain job, regardless of what the software stack is on top of them, they're doing something, right? And then they feed back that information to another potentially edge device, which might be just a general edge computing device. So that's the kind of the next layer for me, or the next sort of part of that edge definition is just an edge computer. It's just a desktop machine. It's one of those ruggedized things. It's a server.
It's quite often a gateway for all the sensing devices before.
Exactly.
And and again, I suppose being less of a computer person as opposed, I mean, I started my life out in what I would call edge locations in physical transportation. So I have when anybody talks edge, I'm thinking edge back to the center. I'm thinking of vehicles on the go, those may be, or factories or maybe, and so there's a physical definition, and I accept, because you've beaten me up over it, that there's a software stack that needs to be taken into account.
Yes.
And it's fun, but of course the two are misconstrued. I think we almost need to describe them differently. That sort of software element and the physical. Where is the edge? Well, the edge is all over the place.
Yeah. So the edge and location wise can be anywhere, any of those types of.
But I think I'll shoot somebody if they start calling regional data centers near edge location.
Oh dear, yes, that's kind of splitting hairs, isn't it?
Oh,
so IoT definitely, and edge computing, which is kind of running. I don't care what it's running really, whether it's running Windows servers, running Linux or whatever, it's doing a particular job. It might have a local database, might have an in-house developed app, a off-the-shelf app, whatever it is. It's connected to those IoT devices. It's not connected to those IoT devices. That's fine. It's just edge computing. You're just doing something at the edge. You can even argue that hyperconverged infrastructure and how we saw satellite buildings and offices, in contrast with the HQ office, with the head office, being part of that kind of edge, if you like. But that's not really important. Again, that would be splitting hairs. But definitely edge computing. So IoT and edge computing. Now, I would like to add a third to that, which is edge cloud, because edge cloud is bringing what you were able to do in a public cloud or in your data center to that edge location. So those same apps and services and PaaS and whatever else you want to use that you had and you're used to using and you are implementing right now in your public cloud, you're bringing that to the edge. And as we said, the edge we define as that location, whatever that location is, car, tank, ship, building, etc.
I think as long as the edge location infrastructure can handle that software.
Yeah, exactly.
That's effectively what you say, and
exactly.
And that's the case. That's okay.
Yeah.
But otherwise it don't work.
No.
and the challenge, again about scaling that up. If you're scaling that up on the edge, it's nigh on impossible to do.
So
in pure cloud terms. So again, what you and I have slightly argued about, can you have an edge cloud? And I would say, actually, in classic terms of what a cloud is, the answer is no. But I do understand the development of that software stack further and further out towards the edge.
So I mean, it's really the same stuff that you'd be running in your data center, because the public cloud providers, the hyperscalers, have not cottoned on to doing like dedicated edge cloud solutions. What they've done is, or what we can do is, we can take whatever they put in whatever they've given us to run in our own data center, which is a stretching of their public cloud services, essentially. So things like Outposts, AWS Outposts, Anthos from Google, and Azure Stack, and things like that from Microsoft. We can take that solution and put that into an edge environment, that kind of physical location definition that we said. So that would make that platform that you're running, that machine or several machines, whatever it is, that cluster, putting that out there, that would make it the edge cloud, because you're essentially now defining the edge by the location, right? And then that would run those same services that you're running, run your Anthos, run your outposts and whatever, as you were running it in your data center. So that's no different, really. At some point, the hyperscalers might go, I think this is a new market for us. We should strip down Anthos. We should strip down the Azure stack, and we should strip down Outposts and so on, and actually make it even smaller, and actually put that into the edge and call that the proper edge cloud.
But it is no longer a cloud, and this is where you and I part company, because it is a server, an edge server, using all the tools you would normally use in a public cloud environment.
Yeah, but it's still connected back to the cloud, right? It's still connected back to the public cloud.
Yes, but probably not so much in what I call online real-time mode, unless absolutely necessary. So one of the challenges that nobody's getting to grips with is, with all the IoT devices out there, how much is sense and respond locally? How much do you do locally?
Yeah, the majority would be. In that case, in that case, it would be. But what I'm saying is that the underlying solution, the platform, is the one that we were running in our data center. In our data center, it was a lot more chatty to the public cloud. But now, because it's on the edge, the application that we're putting on top of it to run on the edge is less chatty, because it's designed to talk to that IoT, a bunch of devices, do all the processing for them, or the majority of them locally, and maybe just drop some metadata back to HQ.
It's using the great tools that exist that have made public cloud what it is, and using them locally. Does that make it a classic cloud? I don't think it does, but I mean, we're splitting hairs now. So
I think what's happening there, by defining the edge, and that's not U2's guitarist, the edge, by the way, it's not to confuse that, dear audience, but just defining that sort of edge area where we want some computing. We've defined it as IoT. Okay, so we know that's clear. An edge computing, just kind of a standard computer that kind of, as we said, runs the one app or database or whatever, and does that local thing. And then the edge cloud, as we said, kind of, bringing those cloud services out to the edge. So I think how we can categorize that or define that, explain those things, is by saying it's down to the use case. So the IoT use case is very clear. We need some computing, readers, measurement, temperature, whatever, blah, 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 on that tank, on that ship, in that factory, whatever. That's your IoT. Edge computing, we need something that will collect that information, most likely a proprietary application that in-house developed, that will collect the information from the IoT, does the processing, does whatever it needs, all done on the edge, or mostly done on the edge, and maybe, as we said, send back some metadata. Right. So that's the use case for edge computing. Edge cloud, same thing. But all we're doing there is we're taking the current, kind of the stretched cloud capability to run your, public cloud local in your own data center type of concept that the hyperscalers have given us. All we're doing is we're taking that and putting that capability, those services, out on the edge. And by the fact that that is running the same software stack, and whatever we're doing in that software stack could well be very similar to the edge computing that we described prior. By doing that, the use case changes for that cloud, for that kind of stretch cloud, by putting it at the edge. So that kind of, for me, makes it an edge cloud solution, because you're using those services.
I'm not sure I understand the use case per se. I understand what you're describing.
Yeah.
What's the use case?
The use case is describing what the use case is trying to do. It's describing essentially how you're using that platform, not the application use case, because we said we don't really care necessarily what that is. It's, like I said, it's talking to some IoT devices. It's collecting data from the IoT devices. It's processing that data locally. That's fine. That's very similar to what the edge computing was doing. However, we're doing it as a as a cloud, as an edge cloud, because we want to use the same platform and the services and the infrastructure and the APIs and everything that we're used to using when we do that as a stretched cloud in our data center. When we talk from our data center, from, let's say, Outposts or something, AWS Outposts, when we talk from AWS Outposts in our data center back to AWS, the big AWS, the proper AWS. So all we've done is we've taken that outpost and put it on the edge, changed obviously the application, because the application now is an edge application, not that data center application, and not a public cloud application. It's a completely different application, but the underlying platform is still the same. So we can build that application for the edge using the same tools, the same API, the same containers, the same cloud environment, the same automation tools, same security, and so on. So it's all, the same look and feel wherever you are, but it's now physically sitting on what would be in your organization defined as your edge environment.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
So that's how I would see the difference now between just an edge computer, that's talking to those IoT devices, versus an edge cloud that's also, or is essentially doing the same thing as an, talking to those IoT devices. It's just the edge computing is, potentially written or has a software stack that might be different to your data, because you're not going to run like VMware there, right? You're going to potentially run Windows Server, maybe Linux, or something, or a small runtime of Kubernetes, or something like that. But it's kind of Kubernetes on bare metal, right? It's not like in a cloud environment.
I get it. I understand. Interestingly, from my
we need a chart. We need to do like a chart for this.
But interesting from my point of view, you're talking about, I'm going to use the term cloud only. I might be over, but a cloud only environment in an organization, in that you are, everything you're doing is going back and actually the centralized processing, if we can call it that, is all AWS based or public cloud based.
No, not necessarily. No, like I said, the edge cloud is doing exactly the same thing as an edge computing.
I get that. But in your architecture for the enterprise architecture that you've got, you are effectively saying that for that set of applications, from the edge to the cloud is all AWS.
Yes. So the platform, the underlying platform, the undergirding platform is all AWS.
Yeah, it's all AWS.
Right? What you do with it is up to you.
Yeah.
How you want to run it, what the app is going to be. Oh, that one is for edge type of stuff. Great. This one's for my data center. Great. That's fine. That's all different.
The question is then going to be, if my architecture is actually a hybrid architecture and I've got some non-AWS cloud or
kind of a multi-hybrid architecture.
Whatever the terminology is. But if I've got
multi-hybrid,
if I've got some of that going on, does that mean I need another edge gateway device in my edge location, wherever that is, whether it's a factory or whatever, i.e. that communicates with the IoT. So that's, I think, all I'm saying. I mean, because I was getting this sort of sense that, if you go down the route of let's say Outposts, what you will, or a stripped down version of Outposts, all the way to the edge, you're ending up being front to back AWS.
Yes.
From an architectural point of view, you're saying, well, I'd better make everything AWS. It's an interesting strategy. Maybe AWS ought to be getting their head around it. But, from my perspective, with a much messier world out there, is at what point do you bring AWS into the equation if you've actually got a hybrid environment? Because you're going to end up with two different devices, effectively, two different little mini computers, microcomputers, whatever they are, running different stacks out there.
Well,
at the edge, because you've got a hybrid environment.
Yeah, I mean, you could, potentially you would, But the point is that the point is not that. The point is not whether because we have that problem in the data center. We have Windows servers, we have Linux servers, we have hyperconverged, we have VMware, we have things like Outposts and Anthos and so on. Yeah, so I think it's my point is not that, because that's something, I think that's a different point to talk about, because we'd essentially be taking that problem to the edge as well, right? That kind of hybrid problem to the edge, if we end up doing that.
Yeah,
that's not always going to be the case, but that is a potentiality.
Maybe this is something we pick up at a later stage.
Let's do that. That sounds good.
I think you and I could argue about this one for a long time to come.
Indeed. Okay, so I think we'll drop some links to the article in regards to the article in the description of the video. There's a lot more to really say in regards to that, but I think fundamentally our focus for me and Paul is really kind of that edge definition and trying to really cram something, as this kind of NAS solution into an area that maybe it's not really designed for. And then, like I said, my concern with that is, although it may initially tick a box, my concern is kind of scaling and moving forward, and that service requiring more support from that sort of PaaS solution from that platform. I think that's kind of my 2 points of concern. So edges kind of a little bit difficult to define, as you've seen, but also trying to kind of be a jack of all trades, something that will do everything no matter where you run it, on the edge, in the data center, or in a public cloud, I think is not really achievable. And we see that because other systems are geared for those platforms that they're good at, or that they sit on. So would I want to run a kind of a very compacted Kubernetes cluster in a public cloud? I can, but is that the best thing for my organization? Probably not. I'll probably go for an XKS service in order to do that, because that's more convenient, it's easier, and it's and I don't have to worry about upgrading it and maintaining it and patching it and things like that. Okay, all right, I think we're there, Paul. That's it.
Hopefully we haven't exhausted our audience today.
Maybe some have fallen asleep. Wake up. But yeah, so I think we're done. So thank you, Paul, as always. Really appreciate all your contribution and insights. I think that's been very useful today. And yeah, all the links to Paul and kind of Blore research and so on will be in the description of the video, so have a look at that. Do check out the wealth of information that Paul and all his colleagues put out. There's a shed load of stuff on there. Every time I go there, I get lost, and because there's so much stuff to read. So ChatGPT to the rescue when it comes to that. So but anyway, yeah, so please do go check that out. Also, please drop us some comments if any of this stuff is kind of interesting for you, you want to kind of hear more about it, or it's not interesting for you, or these topics are really kind of maybe hitting some points for you and kind of where you are and you're thinking. Do drop us some comments. We'd love to hear from you. That would be really useful. And yeah, if anything's kind of been interesting for you, it's kind of affected you. Please support the channel by subscribing, as always. That's really useful. That helps me to produce more content. As you're probably aware, I try to release at least content at least once a week. So that will really help me out as well. Thanks all for watching, and we will see you next time.